Herodotus rarely witnessed the speeches in his histories, but pieced them together from the reports of his informants and no doubt used a great deal of poetic license in crafting them. In Book 4, he demonstrates the Greeks' fascination with the freedom of the nomadic Scythians from the settled city life of the Greeks. But this is exaggerated. Many Scythians practiced agriculture, became settled, and interacted with the Greeks in their urban port colonies on the Black Sea. In the speech of Scythian king Idanthyrssus to his opponent, the Persian king Darius, Idanthyrssus challenges the Persians to discover the tombs of our ancestral fathers and just try to destroy them. Then you will know if we will give battle for these graves or if we will not. Of all the Scythians, the royal Scythians or Sakarakoi may have lived closest to the nomadic ideal. Herodotus placed the tombs of these kings, Tephoi ton Basileon in Greek, in what is now the lower Dnieper Valley. The lower Dnieper was indeed the locale of several high-status graves. These are well-built, more than 15 feet high, and include in their burials human and animal sacrifices and numerous luxurious grave goods. Among them are famous excavated kurgans such as Chertomlik, Ordzhonikidze, and Alexandropol. Some of these, like Parapiaticha, were virtual necropoli or cities of the dead, in which numerous kurgans were erected in a cluster, perhaps as the memorial to a dynasty. They also sometimes mingled Iron Age tombs with earlier Bronze Age memorials, perhaps situating later graves in a pre-existing funerary landscape to lend them greater legitimacy through association with glories of the past. Early illustrations of these monuments testify to the fascination with the legacy of the Scythians in the Russian landscape, along with the romantic notions held about these people. Although not conforming to any single pattern, archaeological excavations of such Iron Age kurgans have found that under the kurgan mound, earth removed during construction can usually be differentiated from the earth and stones piled over the top. The kurgans were created first by digging a descent path or shaft into the surface of the earth under the mound, with stairs leading down to the floor of the shaft. Typically, a threshold step was placed at the entrance of the vaulted burial chamber. A so-called kitchen niche was often placed at the side of the chamber with offerings of food and household goods. The descent or entrance shaft usually extended several meters underground. In many cases, the shaft was reinforced with timbers. When intact, this is aided in radiocarbon dating the tombs and understanding their construction. Excavation of the Ordzhonikidze kurgan required the removal of 500,000 cubic feet of earth. A ring of earth around the shaft opening showed signs of processional pathways used to cart the dead to the tomb. In some kurgans, these were paved with reeds or wood. A second side grave was later added to the kurgan, perhaps in making it a family tomb. Signs of the original excavation are often visible in the sides of the chamber and shafts of kurgans, showing that they were dug with thin, straight-edged tools like modern pickaxes. In the entry passage, fragile remains of wheels of a dismantled wagon were found with human remains, possibly of the wagon driver who was killed for the burial. In the plan view from above, the earth ring around the shaft clearly stands out. In the side grave, the main burials were a young woman with a 2-year-old child along with a young man buried at their head. His skull had been crushed for the ceremony, and he may have been their servant bodyguard. Near the kitchen niche at the feet of the woman and baby was another young woman who may have been a nurse or maid servant. While there seems to be a rather standard form to the Dnieper graves, which all date to around the 4th to 3rd centuries BC, some kurgans associated with the Scythian horizon are quite complex, like the many-chambered tomb from Arjan, Siberia, with its numerous horse burials. Arjan I was excavated by M. Gryaznov in the early 1970s. It established that the Scythian burial tradition had originated in Siberia by the 9th to 8th centuries BC. The inner chamber contained several human burials with tree log coffins. In many Scythian burials, the deceased was virtually clothed in gold. The most famous of these is the so-called Golden Warrior of Issyk in Kazakhstan, generally considered to be of a Saka or Asian Scythian ruler. A kind of peaked headdress like the one from Issyk is known from both men's and women's Scythian kurgan graves. Although once known as the Golden Man, the skeleton was not sufficiently preserved to determine the sex. Scythian women also took warriors' roles and were sometimes the main leaders in their communities. The headdress of the Golden Warrior shows a mountain landscape, from animals, birds, and trees around the lower peaks to a tiger at the top. Issyk is near the Tian Shan mountain range, known as Khan Tengri in Kazakh, which both mean mountains of heaven, a large range of Central Asia. Perhaps this headdress is a stylized representation of the ruler's control over the territory. This is an aerial image of a complex of several kurgans preserved at Issyk at the Museum of the Golden Warrior. Remains of many thousand kurgans like these are visible in satellite images of South Kazakhstan. Most of the kurgans you see are on the order of about 30 meters in diameter. Right of center, the largest kurgan in the area is preserved in a modern housing complex and is over 100 meters across. The Golden Warrior is so iconic that the Kazakhs placed it on the first stamp of the Republic of Kazakhstan in 1992. Representations of Scythians are found in the monuments of other cultures, and although they themselves were prehistoric, the names preserved of their rulers are of an Iranian dialect. This shows that they spoke an Indo-European language related to Persian. The most famous is the Behistun inscription, which the Persian king Darius commissioned in Behistun, Iran around 500 BC. By his pointed cap, a Scythian king can be recognized at the rear of captured rulers in relief carving at the monument. The Scythian leader Skuka is listed among numerous subjected rulers in the inscription, which was carved in Babylonian, Persian, and Elamite. Darius wanted as many as possible to receive the self-proclaimed message of his greatness. There is just no way to know with certainty the true ethnicity of anyone buried in any single Iron Age kurgan. In fact, the convention Russians adopted for identifying Scythian burials is the presence of kurgans containing what they refer to as the Scythian triad: weapons, especially swords and bows and arrows, horse gear or vehicles, sometimes with horses themselves, and gold. Nothing has received more attention than their gold. Like the looting of American Indian graves in the U.S., many found it lucrative to rob gold from Iron Age kurgans. This grave robbing began in antiquity and continues to a lesser extent today. Unfortunately, much of the gold has been melted down and other remains have been lost or damaged through the looting. However, much was saved as a result of the Russian Tsar Peter the Great's decree of 1718, which ordered the ongoing collection of antiquities. This led to the first scientific geological and archaeological collections, which is still maintained today as the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. In addition to the Scythians' own animal-style art, the Dnieper kurgans contain numerous pieces the Scythian nobility commissioned from Greek artists. Like the writings of Herodotus, these provide remarkably rich details from the daily life and beliefs of these people. 4th and 3rd century BC kurgans from the Pazyryk area of the Altai Mountains region have yielded startling remains of tattoos from well-preserved bodies exhumed from ice-filled chambers within the subterranean permafrost. These bodies, including the so-called Siberian Ice Maiden, provide a glimpse of the greater relevance of the animal style beyond Scythian goldwork, and the close relationship of the beliefs it represents not only to craft and art, but body modification and personal identity. Although anthropologists know ethnicity to be a fluid construction, biology and ethnicity frequently overlap. Many ancient mitochondrial DNA samples have now been recovered from Bronze and Iron Age communities in the Eurasian steppe and Siberia. mtDNA shows descent through females and is the easiest DNA to extract from ancient remains. Several studies like those of burials at Beryl in Kazakhstan and Kizil in the Altai have indicated that these populations had mixed European and Asian heritage. mtDNA indicates that Iron Age Eurasian genetics were founded on a mixture of Eastern and Western lineages, with the Western also appearing far to the east, but not the reverse. This could indicate that intermixture of populations was combined with west to east migrations. Russian studies represented in this diagram concluded that the genetic heritage of the Pazyryk people was closest to the Sami people of northern Eurasia. This could be a sign of northward movement of local populations in later times.